Hi everyone, my name is Carl-Edwin Michel. I'm going to be your host today and welcome to the production challenges of cross-platform games. So we're going to have a great panel today, three great people in the gaming industry that are going to talk to us about these challenges. So first of all, I want to introduce you to Manea Castet. He's the lead producer at Gameloft. He's a producer, entrepreneur with 10 years of experience and expertise in the mobile game industry. Manea is the lead producer and senior producer at Gameloft here in Montreal. He's now working on new thrilling cross-platform games with some of the world's biggest franchises. So, Manea, how are you today?
I'm fine. Hello, everybody.
Great. And our second panelist is going to be Stefan Beauchamp-Daniel, producer on Dead by Daylight at Behavior Interactive. Stefan has over 10 years of experience in game development. He is currently overseeing all aspects of production on Dead by Daylight. Stefan, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here today, and thank you for the introductions, Carl-Edwin.
Perfect. And finally, we have Gabriel Huot, a video game programmer at Illogica Studios. With more than 10 years of experience, Gabriel has worked on many games and has taken a lead role in various multi-platform projects, including Roller Coaster Tycoon, Joyride, Lara Croft Go, and Hitman Go. Gabriel, how's it going?
Hi, it's going great. I'm really happy to be here today.
Fantastic. Now, guys, just to let you know, while we're discussing the challenges in cross-platform games or creating cross-platform games, please ask your question in the chat during the presentation. You'll be able to ask your question, and obviously we'll make sure that we answer all of those questions at the end of the presentation. So let's get it going. Let's start. Well, guys, it's time to get into the meat of this and talk about cross-platform games. And I want to start right away with by asking you, what makes a good cross-platform game? I don't know who wants to start on this one, but it's important to know, like, what is a good cross-platform game? And maybe I'll start with Manea on that one.
Okay, sure. I'm pretty sure everybody in this panel will have interesting take on this. What I would say is that what makes a good platform game, a cross-platform game, is a game that, by the way you play it and the way you experience it, like basically gets rid of the platform where it is. Like whatever you play it on mobile, on PC, on PlayStation, it is a game that is made to be enjoyed on every platform. A game that have been designed in a way that it make it enjoyable in every platform, and that basically the platform is just a tool to experience what the game have to offer, and there is no more limit, or you don't have to master a specific way of playing or a specific way of holding a button or a keypad, and just making sure that the game speaks for itself without taking care of anything related to platform. Just a good way to start the thing, I think, but pretty sure there is other way to describe a good platform game.
No, for sure. And Stefan, what do you think of that?
I would add on to that. I think it's a way to let the players choose the best way for them that they want to approach a game, the best way in terms of habits. For example, being able to play on mobile and just pick up a game and play for 5-10 minutes, or move on to PC and play the same game. And if we're really pushing the boundaries of cross-platform, starting to talk about cross-progression and being able to roam that data from one platform to the other, depending on where I'm at. I'm just waiting to have a rendezvous at an appointment at the doctor's office or something like that, and I can play my game and then come back during the evening and play for 4 hours the same game again. So it's really about letting the player have a choice and a say over the way they prefer to play, and being able to get everyone involved as part of a single game world, let's say. Yeah.
And you, Gabriel, would you add into on this?
Well, from a technical standpoint, a good cross-platform game is a game that doesn't feel like it's cross-platform. It's a game that you wouldn't even know that it wasn't designed for that platform.
No, that's good. That's good to know. And you know, it must be a difference between creating a game for one platform versus multi-platform. Is there some challenges? What's the big difference between developing for one versus multiple? And maybe I'll start with you, Gabriel, on that one.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things to take into account when developing for multiple platforms. Well, especially that all these platforms have different requirements. On Xbox, you cannot have a loading that locks the game for more than 1 second, or it will consider the game as frozen and you'll fail certification. So that's something to take into account early, because making something asynchronous is really complicated.
Yeah, and maybe you, Stefan, and is there any difference you see or you feel between developing for one platform versus multiple?
Well, I'll stay on the tech side. I think Manea has maybe more of a design background, so maybe he's going to come at the problem with that angle in mind. I don't want to force you into anything, but more from a technical standpoint, each platforms bring their own set of systems that are already implemented. For example, you're working on a game, developing a game on Xbox, on Switch, on PlayStation. They all will expose their own system for achievements, for friends, for creating groups of players to play together, for matchmaking, etc., etc. And when you're developing a game from a strictly technical standpoint on a single platform, then you can easily benefit from the way those systems are implemented for that platform. But when you're trying to really transcend the barriers across the different platforms, then there's a few ways to approach the problem. Either you're really going with an approach where you will have to implement layers that will interface with each of those individual systems on each platform, or you will simply re-implement layers to expose the exact same systems, but that don't really care about the platform. And that's something we've been slowly building up on Dead by Daylight over time. At the beginning, we were heavily relying on Steam, for example, which has a lot of things it support to make sure we had matchmaking going. We were using peer servers, so one of the characters was actually hosting the game, et cetera, et cetera. But as we added more and more platforms, we had to build our own tools and features to cover everything we need to do in a game and make sure those would apply to any single platform.
Mm-hmm. And you, Manea?
Sure, I'm gonna cover a bit more on the design part because indeed I think it's a good complement to what you just say on the technical part. The first thing that comes to mind in terms of challenges, in my opinion, is that it's not every game can be a cross-platform game. Like it depends on the game genre, on what kind of game you do. I will give an example: real-time strategy game where you have a lot of button to push, a lot of click, a lot of attention to get. Maybe not the best kind of game you're gonna play on console. Maybe not the best one you want to play on mobile. Same, an idle game, really fun on mobile may not fit the needs and the expectation of a more hardcore gamer on console, for example. So I will say that it's not for every type of game, and you have to question yourself: is this if what the game has to offer in terms of gameplay, experience, immersion can be enjoyed or not on every platform? Is there a way to enjoy it a little bit every now and then, or do we need a lot of focus, a lot of attention? Do you need also to be, you can hop up quickly, do a quick battle with your friend for 10, 20 minutes and go back to work? Can you also spend 3 hours sitting down on your computer and have fun and the same amount of fun? So I will say that the first question is, does my game fit the requirement and the expectation of all these platforms I'm targeting for? Before trying to say, okay, I need to be cross-platform for sure, it's a no-brainer, like there is a lot of people, a lot of platforms. So it's just a question that it doesn't fit every game. First challenge.
Definitely.
We've had great examples. I'm thinking back in the day of StarCraft on Nintendo 64, which I look back at that today and why would you even consider doing that? And there's a choice to be made early in the development process to know what exactly are you trying to make in terms of product, what kind of users it will cater for, and what kind of interface you need to be able to play the game that's going to make that a fun experience. So.
And I think it's evolving a lot with time. Like we could give the example of Fortnite, which is a game that it required a lot of attention, required a lot of reflex. Like you have to be careful and you have to be watching around you if you're if you're going to be killed or not. And despite this kind of gameplay, you can enjoy it, and we see people enjoying it everywhere, like every kind of platform, either mobile, PC, or console. And it's interesting because like I have the feeling that like 5 years ago, it would have been what you want to do a battle royale on the mobile screen? Why? On the opposite, on Switch, no, it's for PC. You need a mouse, And we see that the mentality are evolving. The people are accepting also some other way of more and more people are playing first-person shooters on console, for example. So it's something really trendy, I would say, and it's good to see.
So I have another question for you guys. Obviously, COVID-19 and the whole pandemic has changed a lot of things, and it looks to me, and I don't know about you guys, but it looks like more people are consuming games, yes, but they're also playing a lot more together. Stefan, what do you think of that?
It's definitely a trend we've seen over the past few months. As you mentioned, players consume more games. Every single human being right now is rather limited in the hobbies they can actually have due to the world situation. And we've seen that reflect into gaming habits. But as you mentioned, one of the biggest things we've also noticed recently is the fact that players play games more, but they also play games together more. They're really using games as a way to socialize together because of how complicated it actually is to do that in person.
I think it's really interesting what you say, Stefan, on this, because like it's a real life and a real example of one of the learning we got from one of the survey we released at Gameloft regarding gaming habits in Canada and Quebec in particularly. We saw that, of course, the pandemic were making people play more, but playing more together. And I don't recall exactly the number, but I think it was around 40% of people were saying that being able to play with your friend is a clearly high motivator for purchasing a game, for example, and even more if like it's on any platform. So the cross-play and the cross-platform in general is more and more interesting, even in nowadays.
Thank you for that. I want to go a little bit more on the technical side because I'm looking at Gabriel right now, and I know he wants to say a lot about the technical stuff. But what are the technical challenges you guys would say on developing a cross-platform game? It could be assets scalability, technical choices, performance on each platform. Like, is there any? And Gabriel, you were talking earlier about frozen for 1 second. And it creates an issue on Xbox. Like, is there a lot of those challenges when you create a cross-platform game?
Yeah, and it really depends on the platform. Like the Switch, the biggest problem is your polygon budget and the amount of memory you have. Fitting a game that wasn't made for Switch on the Switch, it may require reducing textures, maybe even. Like this once, we even deleted the LOD zeros for some of the assets because they were never seen anyways because of poly count. So just not having them in memory, it helped a lot. Then there are mobile platforms. Not all mobile devices support all shader models, meaning that some fancy screen effects may not be available on some lower devices, especially on Android, because iOS is pretty straightforward. They have like 10 supported devices because the older ones can't upgrade the OS and are not supported anymore. But the Android market is so fragmented. Porting a mobile game on Android, you're going to see a lot of different challenges with different hardware manufacturers, and so sometimes there are texture sizes that aren't supported on some mobile devices, or some render texture types. On Lara Croft Go, I had to completely rewrite the shadow system for Android because some Android devices didn't support the depth render texture they used for the shadows on iOS.
Is there some challenges between devices, like even from mobile to tablet? I guess it's still a mobile device, but like from sizes, does that bring more challenges?
From one mobile device to another, there are challenges. They have wider screens with the iPhone X and up. During a long time, all iPhones were 16:9, but on Android, there's really a large pool of different screen resolution and aspect ratios, and the UI has to scale to all of these. Also, another interesting anecdote when we ported Lara Croft Go to Windows Store app, even if you tell it to be full screen, there's nothing that can prevent a user from doing Alt-Enter and going into windowed mode. And then there's nothing that can prevent the user from resizing that Windows Store app window. Meaning we had to add black bars on all four corners, like on all four sides of the screen, so that when they resized the window, they couldn't see outside of the level bounds by messing up with the camera field of view by resizing the window.
That's a challenge, that's for sure. And you, Stefan, do you see other challenges by doing cross-platform games?
I'll quickly build up on what Gab mentioned and connecting it with design too, because I think there's the idea of how do you get the game to run on the platform. That's the first level, and there's really a bunch of challenges just in getting it to run. Dead by Daylight, for example, the added complexity is the fact that it is an online multiplayer, at least somewhat competitive game, and it relies on visual aspects of the game in a pretty important fashion. It is, in a sense, a game of hide and seek. And if you see something on a certain platform that isn't exactly replicated on a different platform, for example, because of limitations with texture size, shaders, performance, etc., this is actually a pretty big problem that bubbles up at a design level, because now you're playing the game on a certain platform that's actually in a position that's more advantageous for you in opposition to a different platform. So that's definitely something else to keep in mind. That's not going to be unique to, not going to be shared for all games, but something to keep in mind for a certain type of games.
Well, you're talking about gaining an advantage. I've even seen Battlefield players playing at very low graphic settings because the grass is lower resolution and hides the enemy less than at higher.
And these are challenges we've faced at every step along the way, especially with the fact that we added platforms one at a time. So every time we would introduce a new platform, something specific to the limitations of that platform would actually come up. And the grass is a prime example, because of the grass is probably the bane of developer and a graphics programmer, in that it requires a lot of polys to look nice. It doesn't serve a very big purpose, but between ugly looking grass and nice looking grass, it makes all the difference in the world in terms of how the game looks all around. So this is a very good example that you mentioned here, Gab.
Something also related to what have been said just earlier is that something to keep in mind when you do a cross-platform game, that you want to make sure it's cross-play. So as you say, you need to see exactly the same thing, the same player at the same time, etc. You need also to have the game at the same version. And versioning when you are handling platform game is hard, because when you have a new version of your game, okay, it takes the time to do it, but after that, sending it to Apple, sending it to Microsoft, sending it to Steam, sending it to Sony is really different. And some of them are really quick, or like automatically approved. Some of them can take a long time. And the problem in the end is that, especially if you're crossplay, you need everybody to be playing at the same level. So you have now to be playing with time and making sure you have enough time for your longest platform before you adapt the first one, you update the first one. So it's also a big challenge, especially when you're crossplay.
Thank you for adding that, Manea. It was the second point I was about to make after riffing on Gab. For me, anyways, it's something I deal with on a almost daily basis. With the game being on 7, 8, 9 platforms and counting, every single first-party company is so different in how they work. As you mentioned, approval times are completely different from one to the other. And at the end, the only thing you want to make sure as a game developer is, if I want to release my update on a certain date, I just have to make sure every single platform can get there on time. And that's a really big challenge to add on top of just the purely technical challenges that go into crossplay.
I want to talk about UI and UX, but before I go there, I just want to ask you guys a question. Do you guys play favorite? And when I say that, is that if you have a community that is stronger on one platform, would you cater more to these guys, or you gonna deploy new features or what have you on all the platforms? And maybe Manea, you can start on that one.
I can start on that one. Regarding the past experience, at least we'll see for the upcoming one. But there was no like favoritism or like making sure a player on one platform is not like advantaged through another. There may be like with some game genre, you could argue that it's easier to play with a mouse and a keyboard compared to your finger on the screen. So that's not based on the game itself, but based on the nature of the platform. But in the end, we need to make sure that you do not feel you have a low version or a subpar version because you're playing on this platform or the other. And players are smart also. We see a small but still decent part of players who play on many platforms. You start on the mobile in the morning. You finish on your PC. So I would say that you need to be respectful with every kind of platform. You never know which one is gonna how do you call it? Take off the most, and it changed with time. We saw that, for example, we released Asphalt 9 on first mobile and then Switch, and like the Switch was a really great success for us, but it also really helped the mobile version. So in a way, there is like communication, even if it's like there is no thing in game that tell you go from one platform to the other. It's just like word of mouth and this kind of behavior. So respecting a platform will benefit not only the platform but the other. So I think we should be avoiding favoritism.
I think it's important to keep that in mind at all times, and in particular, that's something I want to keep always at all times. Is we're trying to make a game for multiple platforms. So whenever we start to implement or work on a new feature or something, we really have to think about that feature with consideration to every single platform is going to be available on, which is all platforms in the end. So you're presented with. You can imagine kind of a gigantic Venn diagram with each platform's limitation. And there are certain points which are common to every single platforms. And these are ideally the ones you want to hit, because if you're hitting for those overlaps where all the platforms will benefit from the features you're making, then everybody can benefit from that. And the product is made even better because of that.
Yeah, we usually try to have a single game run on all platforms instead of having multiple different versions of the games for different platforms. It's just easier to maintain for us. And also it's possible now that the PS4 architecture is a little more standard than the PS3 and PS2 were. So it's easier. And also with the big game engines like Unity and Unreal that all support multi-platform, building for multiple platforms, it's a lot easier than it used to be making a single multi-platform game and not having to support, like not having to make the same game twice for two different platforms.
And you mentioned you're working, Gab, mostly on mobile titles recently, but it's a good point you're making. And to connect that back to of console platforms that's coming up, more and more these consoles feel more and more like PCs, which was definitely less and less the case over previous generations. I'm thinking back of PS3 which you mentioned, Gabriel, which had the weird CPU and SPU setup, which had so much power for you to use, but it took years until developers were actually able to fully push what the platforms were capable of doing. So the more and more we're going towards a hardware that's closer and closer between all platforms, the easier it is for developers to actually get the one single game on all those platforms. So.
I think that's one of the things that Microsoft got right with the Xbox. It was making it almost like a PC. It was just so easier for developers than working on PlayStation. Not that you couldn't make great games on PlayStation. If you look at studios like Naughty Dog, Uncharted just looks so beautiful on PlayStation because it was made for PlayStation from the get-go.
That's cool, guys. And I want to talk now, jump on the UI, UX challenges. Obviously, when we say cross-platform, yes, we talk about mobile consoles, but, now, we have the Switch and there's virtual reality. What are those challenges?
I can talk a bit if you want. I don't have a lot of to share on virtual reality on my side. However, regarding the Switch, the PlayStation, the mobile, like the PC, like all of these have a lot of really challenging UX UI challenges. Some of them will be just basically the fact that on the phone, you have no button. On PC, you have a full keyboard. On Switch, it's really different also. So the way your choices, so your camera, your character, and your control, like that's often in game design the base of your game, and like you need to make sure you master your choices to make sure you have a great game later. And they are completely different, or they are handled really different. So there are tips or way to help game developer to do that, and you see them a lot used in the industry today. You can see in many games, like for example, some of the recent AAA console games, there is some sort of similar structure for the menu. For example, the way you open a main menu, or the way you handle the tabs of this main menu, and interestingly enough, it is the same structure and same way to organize in many games, in many different publishers, many different game genres. Is because it is a structure that is well known to be performing on PC, performing with a mouse, performing with a joypad, and you just like use R and L the triggers to change, and also performing on I say mobile, I wanted to say console, with the R and L, and also on mobile if you have a mobile version. So we see more and more like tips and tricks like that being shared within the industry, but still pretty much big challenges. And this also is evolving. We were talking about the control of a character. Like right now, we see a lot of games, for example, on mobile with a virtual pad, which was 5 to 10 years ago something like crazy. Like say, why do you do a virtual pad on a screen? Like it's not fun. You should play differently. But interestingly enough, we see more and more performing game with virtual pads. So it's also helping us going a bit more toward the console and the PC on this topic when you do a mobile game. So that again is evolving with time, but a lot of challenges.
Gabriel?
I worked on the VR port of Hitman Go. If you know the game, it's a mobile game, and it's kind of like a board game. UX for VR is really, really interesting because it's very different from anything we've seen before because of the perspective you're looking at the world in. At first, we wanted to make like these rooms where you would view the board on a table and have these rooms match the chapters of the game, which are in the original games. They're like boxes, like you're taking a board game out of a box. So we wanted to make these rooms, like there's the airport room, there's the mansion room, the theater room, and it looked really weird. Like in the airport room, the airport was so big, even though the chairs were to scale, you looked at the chairs and they looked like these tiny elementary school plastic chairs compared to you because the airport was just so large. And also we found that having the board sitting on a table, it felt weird. In the end, you just play the game in an empty void. The board is like on the floor, and the perspective is like if you were sitting on the floor next to the board, and that is what worked best. But we had to try a few different things before getting there and getting it right. Also, menus. You can't have 2D menus in VR. Even just something as simple as drawing an aiming crosshair. You have to draw your aiming crosshair at the depth at which the player is looking, or you're going to see two aiming crosshairs. Kind of like when you're at the eye doctor and he asks you to tell when you see two fingers instead of just one. If you misplace your UI in depth in VR, it will appear double, and it will look weird, which means that you cannot draw traditional HUDs in VR. You cannot have flat 2D menus in VR. In the end, we completely redid the whole Hitman Go menu to have these little, instead of having boxes, we had these miniature play boards, which were made with the assets of the actual boards for different chapters. And these represented the chapters, and you like selected them in this 3D world. And then you had floating cards representing the levels instead of having like the map where you choose which level you want to select. Everything has to be 3D and inside the world, or it will just look weird and impose on you.
That's good. I want to ask you a question about the word port. adapted. Do you have to convince gamers that games are cross-platform or not adapted, or is it a good or a bad thing to use those words? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of cross-platform gaming?
I think it's a really key topic of your communication and what you tell to your player. Each platform have their own habit, own expectation. We all know like the war between the computer versus the console versus the mobile also. So we need to make sure when you have a game that is meant to be played in every platform, it is really truly made to be played in every platform. We have had experience in the past where we try to do just a basic port, something that is just technically a port, but it's still not adapted to the platform you're giving to the it doesn't work. The player don't want it. Like if you do something cross-platform, as I was saying at the beginning, it needs to be something they want and they expect and that meet their expectation. So I would say that you need to be really transparent about your game, really honest about what it is, making sure that you have done play tests in every platform, not just favorizing one platform and just never play testing the other. It's a big challenge. And after that, it also comes with communication. We have this discussion in Gameloft also, making sure how do we communicate, what is the release order for the platform to make sure it is not taken like as a mobile game when you release a PC game, or it is not taken a PC game when you release a Switch game. Is it clearly taken as a cross-platform game? You have a maybe demo or videos that show that, but it is clearly something that you need to be careful and being fully honest with the player. And in the end, the game itself will convince the player if it's made for him or not. So that's why playtest and user test is really important. But it's clearly a tricky topic.
And in the end, I think it's really about the quality of the implementation of the game on that platform. The fact that it's qualified as a port or not, or whatever, there are bad games, I would say, that can be released on any single unique platform. There can be bad ports that are released on certain platforms, and there are games that are just going to hit a home run on every single platform they're on. So as Manea said, thinking about the end user, how they're going to experience the game, looking and confirming if those assumptions are right, and confirming that they're actually appreciating the game. And if they're not reacting to that, especially in the context of a live game, the game can evolve over time. Obviously, you want to hit good right at the beginning. It's really important to build, to get the snowball going, but you're always capable of reacting later down the line and to make those adjustments that come from player keeping and staying in the game for months or years even.
Like Stefan said, it's really down to how you port your game. There are good ports and there are bad ports, and there are even good ports that have some aspects. I remember a game, I won't say which game, but I remember a game, A was run and B was like secondary attack. And on the keyboard and mouse, run was shift and secondary attack was right click. And in the menus, because of that, didn't implement a different control scheme in the menus. So in the menus, accept was shift and back was right click.
That's why we need playtest.
It is a very good example of not thinking through until the full.
Yeah, it's not just mapping the input device for that platform, but it's really thinking through all the steps and whether or not it makes sense to use this at that time. Because on PC, you would expect enter to be select and escape to be back, not shift and right click.
Guys, I want to shift gear a little bit and talk about, team management. How do you go about, how do you manage, I guess, and maybe what would be your recommendation to manage an efficient team that will produce multi-platform games?
I'll start on that one. I think that's an interesting topic to be asked, because we've really went through multiple ways in how the team was organized to work on the platform, on the multi-platform aspect of it. As mentioned, for Dead by Daylight specifically, we originally launched on one platform, and we really added ports using sort of side teams as the game progressed. But the main core team was really focusing on the development of the main game. And that's always been rather difficult, actually, because there's really a gap of knowledge between what the team developing the game knows, what the team developing the port knows. Once you're done with the port per se, how do you transfer that knowledge over to the main game? Do the resources remain available? How do you all put that together? So the more and more we go at it, the ideal scenario is obviously everyone is part of one big team, and if you're adding onto a platform, you need to find a way to have the knowledge to be spread between the team that's developing the game and the team that's developing the port, so that once you're done with the port and it just becomes another SKU that you're working on, multiple people on that team know how to develop for that platform, because you're really going to have to consider that at every step of the way when you're developing.
I think you definitely need the help of external or additional teams when you want to cover very like all the platform or the most amount of platform possible. Like in themselves, each platform are their own challenges and their own version. I was talking about the specification of PC, the amount of different Android and iOS version and devices, all the console, the next gen, new gen. So it's of course at least in the past experience hard to do everything in one team. We often see like having one platform done in the core team, and I will say the other externalized in other teams. Something we try, but I cannot share the result yet, but something we are trying currently also is trying to have a master of each platform done by the core team, and with that the help of external team for like let's say you have the master iOS, then other iOS version are worked by someone else, master console, and the other console are helped with someone else, master PC, other spec, etc. So with this, having at least the possibility of share knowledge between the three big directions, like between console, PC, and mobile, share knowledge, share UI, UX, share information, and then the help in declining everything. We'll see how it works, but I think it's clearly linked to what you were saying, Stefan. It's a lot of information and knowledge sharing between the platforms, because you don't want just one platform to be put away and you don't really care about it, and if you do that, the result will not be good. So you need to care about everyone.
Yeah, I'm usually part of this external team that does the port, and not really on the management side. But what I'd say is thinking ahead and building your game with the kind of abstraction where you think in terms of features and not how they're implemented. The gameplay team shouldn't have to worry how achievements are implemented on iOS or Android or Xbox or PS4. You've unlocked an achievement, and then the tech team should work on making achievements work across all platforms. It really removes a lot of headaches having this kind of abstraction early on where you know your gameplay code isn't going to change when you implement a new platform.
There's also a big difference between a port for a game you're just putting out, and that's the end of development of the game, which if done by an external team, it's not a problem in and of itself. The game is done, it's working on that platform, there's nothing new to put onto that platform. That's fine, you don't necessarily need to share the knowledge for that. But in the case of a game as a service, of a live development game, you really want to make sure the team that is going to keep maintaining that SKU eventually has a good understanding of that platform and of every single platform. So that's the case where you really want to be more careful about the team structure. And what Manea suggested is something actually rather interesting, and curious to hear about the results of that in the future. The idea of trying to form kind of a web as part of the core team that is going to connect with the different versions. So at least you know that there is a shared knowledge as part of the core development team for that game.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for that. And guys, I have one last question for you. You know, the world is I guess there's the consoles and all those platforms those worlds are blurring more and more. And if you're a student and you want to work in the gaming industry and develop games, is there any I would say advice you would give that person who wants to create a cross-platform game, or do you think that you just focus on developing just games in general, and then the cross-platform aspect of it will come after?
I would say I have a pretty strong opinion in that. I would just say pick up a game engine, just start doing something, work on something, put something into the world. If you get to a point where in your career you need to work on a cross-platform game, on a multi-SKU game, you're going to get to that, and there's learnings to be had while you get to that. But in the end, it's always just a constraint, which is the same thing as just developing a game in general. Just get to it, do some work, get used to using engines, get used to whatever your discipline may be, whether it's programming, design, UI, art, etc. Doesn't really matter. Get out there, work on something, work on some projects. This is really what's going to get you into the game and learning the most about game development.
I don't have much to add to that. I would have said exactly the same thing. Just pick up either Unreal or Unity. They're both free for students. Unreal may be a little easier for beginners because of Blueprint. It doesn't necessarily require you to know how to code. Unity is a little easier for coders because it's C# instead of C++, so it's a little safer for beginner programmers. But either are good starting points, and just start messing with the engines and doing stuff.
Manea?
Well, yeah, to add on that, I will say that for a new person, like a new student that arrive in this industry, and that's like you're always looking for new ideas, fresh ideas. You need to, especially at this time, you want to see what's new, and maybe you will be the next Minecraft creator, or I don't know, just by creating innovative ideas. And so look at what are the trends. Clearly, cross-platform is a big trend. We've been seeing that it's a huge part of nowadays gaming. I think there is a study we shared where we see that it's part of, like, when you decide to purchase a game, like, it's a strong argument if you can play it with your friend that have it on another platform, for example. So, like, it's clearly it's clearly trending, and it won't stop. So I would think it's a good idea to try to innovate in this area, to make sure that how do you play with your game on different platforms? Is it the same experience? Do you change your experience based on the platform, but it's globally a shared experience? But there is a ton of source for innovation in this sub part of the industry, I would say, the global industry. And second thing, I would just triple down on what you just say, guys, with like taking Unity or Unreal, or just not trying to reinvent the wheel every time. Just that's why, like, you want your brain to be focusing on innovation, either technical or game design or any kind of innovation, and you don't want to be focusing on the programming a new version of the same physics tool that you can see here. You can take some asset from some of the stuff from Unreal or Unity. You can don't spend time doing what exists already. Use what's existing and spend time doing something new.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot. And that was the production challenges for cross-platform games. Thanks for everybody on the panel today for participating. Manea Castet, lead producer at Gameloft. Stefan Beauchamp-Daniel, producer on Dead by Daylight at Behavior Interactive. And Gabriel Huot, video game programmer at Illogica Studios. So now the panel is done. It's time for your questions. So, we have a few questions already, so we'll go over those questions, and please feel free to ask your question while we're the panelists are responding to these. So let's start with the questions. welcome back, and thank you. Thanks, Manea, Gabriel, and Stefan for this great interaction about the crossplay. And obviously, we have to acknowledge it was a pre-recorded intervention, and obviously with everything that is going on right now, and fortunately, with what's going on at Ubisoft, everything seems to be okay. So our thoughts are obviously with the Ubisoft employees and everybody that was there in the building earlier this afternoon. But it looks like everything is okay now, so we're really happy about that. So what I'm going to do now, obviously, this is the question period. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A section, and you'll be able to ask your question, and I will ask them to the panelists. But I would love to try. Not try, but start with one question. And my first question would be, guys, do you think cross-platform and cross-play will become the new standard in video game? And maybe I'll start with Stefan on that one.
I don't say that it'll necessarily become a standard for every game. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to think of every game benefiting from cross-play and cross-platform. But I think it's something more and more players will be expected to have for that. I think it might actually make more sense when I'm thinking of live games. There's an added complexity to putting crossplay, cross-platform in place on a game. So the longer the lifetime of the game, the more sense it actually there actually is to invest in that solution. But I think it's still really going to be a choice on a case-by-case basis. Some products are really going to be made and well made for those mechanics, and some others it won't really make sense to do that. I'm thinking, for example, of the single-player experiences of this world, which could definitely be useful for you to be able to roam your save around from platform to platform. But in general, they're probably not the experiences that most benefit from cross-play and cross-platform.
And what about you, Gabriel? What do you think of cross-platform and cross-play in the future, and if it is going to be a standard in video games?
Well, I think that if Google, Microsoft, and Amazon succeed in their bet of creating a live streaming platforms for games, it will certainly blur the line between different platforms, because then you could easily see a PC or console game even run on the TV with just a Chromecast. Also, I've heard a few days ago they ported Control to the Switch, and instead of really porting it, they're actually streaming the game. So they were able to port it without downgrading the graphics, and they're just using the Switch as a streaming platform.
That's actually a good idea. That's awesome. Manea, on your side?
Yeah, I'm pretty aligned with what I've been saying actually regarding if it is going to be the or one of the big trend for the future. I will say also that it makes even more sense when you think of multiplayer games, where like the goal is to have the biggest communities interacting together. And earlier, I would say a few years ago, we were thinking about like there were some type of game for different platform and some type of gameplay that will be used only on specific platform. And we see that more and more people are getting together, whatever the gameplay, and you're totally okay if you play on console, on PC, etc. The idea is to play with your friends. So I guess it's going to be more and more.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think it's going to be interesting for all the players to be able, like you said, to play with their friends, even though they don't have the same platform. So another one for you guys: do you think cross-platform is more restrictive, or does it allow for more freedom? Gabriel, what do you think of that one?
Well, it surely forces you to be more creative, because you can't approach, let's say, the inputs. You can't approach the inputs the same way on mobile than you do on a traditional PC or console. And even between PC and console, PC you have a full-fledged keyboard. Console you have a very limited set of inputs on your controller. So it forces you to be creative and think outside the box. About 20 years ago, games started limiting themselves to a fixed number of buttons equal to the number of buttons you had on your controller, because of the emergence of new high-end CD or DVD-based consoles compared to the older cartridge-based consoles. But since people have been more creative, like using the bumpers to change the configuration of your controller and have more buttons, it's gotten a lot better in the last 20 years.
And you, Manea, what do you think of that?
I would say that when you learn game design at game design school, they tell you that game design with constraints is game design, and one of the best one. That's actually really true. Like you often have to play and accept the constraints, and cross-play, cross-save, cross-platform is clearly coming with a lot of constraints. It will have a lot of challenge, as we saw in the talk, the way you interact, the way you move in your world, etc. So I would say it is clearly a challenge, but like it gives ideas, and in the end, it get maybe a better game or a better experience. So I think it's interesting. For the list, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Stefan, you?
Actually, super briefly, I'll flip the question around. I know you're asking if it's more restrictive or allows for more freedom from a development standpoint.
Exactly.
But I'll go at it the other way. What it does is add more freedom for players, and that's something we have to keep in mind around that feature at all times. And is the main reason why we want to develop games that use cross-play and cross-platform. So for developers, I think it's really a flip of a coin. It adds complexity for sure, but it's not going to make or break the ability to put out a game. But it really opens up some potential doors for players.
That's great. Thanks for that. My other question for you guys, it's obviously there's a lot of platform out there. New generations of consoles, we talked about that during the panel, are coming or are here actually now. What do you decide? How do you decide which platform a game should be launched? So is it a difficult decision for you guys to say, okay, we should launch on this one first, or we say, you know what, let's make sure that we're on all the platforms. And I'll start. Yeah, go ahead.
It's pretty interesting, and I think it's going to really depend on a studio per studio basis. I'm thinking of Behavior Digital, for example, in which we're trying to make gamers games. These games are usually normally targeted for gamer platforms, PC, PlayStation, Xbox. Like these are the first type of consoles we think of with the games we're trying to make. And due to that, it almost becomes the answer is almost already answered before we even go into anything. But if we put our finger on something we feel is going to be really cool as a kind of game, or we think a certain design can be adapted to a platform that we wouldn't normally target, we're certainly going to open up that. But I think the experience that we have as developers inside a studio, the things that we do well, that's going to play a big role in the platforms we think about before starting development.
Yeah, that's great. And you, Manea?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the studio and what environment and what is the global strategy. We speak for Gameloft. For Gameloft, we have always been known to do some console-like game on mobile, for example, with high quality mobile AAA, as we call them, and we definitely want to embrace this new trend of crossplay and cross-platform. We are launching new games and preparing new games that will be using this strength and also be on other platforms, using our strength, and be on other platforms. So it's kind of a logic segue in our opinion, making great games that now will not only be on mobile, but everywhere.
Yeah, that's great. And you, Gabriel?
Well, it's not usually my decision. Usually there's a producer that comes and tells me, we want the game to be on all platforms and release at the same time.
That's good. Well, great response. Listen, I want to go to the public because we have a few questions here. One from Marcus Tan, which is actually a good one. How will next-gen controllers change the way you develop games cross-platform? Will you embrace the full features of a new controllers like the dual sense of the PS5? Sorry. And who wants to answer that one first?
I can jump in. I'll jump in. I think it's interesting. It goes back to some topics we hit on during the roundtable. when you're specifically thinking about crossplay and cross platforms, you're really thinking about things that exist and are available on all platforms. So I think these platform-specific mechanisms are not necessarily well fitting with the idea of developing a game solution that's going to apply to all the target platforms you're putting out the game on. That being said, it is something that's going to trigger developers to tap into a little bit. It's always exciting to see some new technology come in. And I think what it could do is motivate and generate new ideas, new and fresh ideas for developers to use those things. But I think it's going to be sort of going against the trend of cross-play, cross-platforms, if it ever becomes one, because they are usually very specific things that are pushing on one specific platform.
What I'm most excited to see in the next few years is what traditional controllers will take from the experiments that VR has done, because VR has been doing a lot of experiments with hand tracking, even haptics, force feedback, ways to feel with your hands something that's not really there, to have some sort of feedback of why your hand cannot go there because there's a wall. And I think if it gets integrated back into more traditional consoles and computer, even without having an end-mounted display, it could be very interesting to see what people do with those technologies.
Manea?
Yeah, I will say also that I think gamepad is becoming more and more important for any platform. We saw with streaming service like Stadia or other one that you can even stream on your mobile phone and you will play with a gamepad. We see that even Apple with Apple Arcade encourage gaming on mobile with gamepad. On the opposite, gamepad are also more and more standard on the computer industry, computer game industry. A lot of people plug their Xbox gamepads on PC, and I don't know how far the other gamepad will go. I don't know if every new gamepad will be like the new PlayStation 5 sensitive gamepads. We'll see, but at least I will say that it's a safe bet to make sure that your game is playable. Whatever the platform, the game can be enjoyed on gamepad. If you want to go cross-play, cross-platform, it's important.
That's great. I have another question from the audience. Pascal Quinton is asking, do you think that all owners of different platforms will try to help developers in the future with cross-platform? I guess that means, are you getting helps from the creators when you create a game, or do you think they're going to help you guys to create cross-platform games?
I have one actually pretty interesting example on that one. I don't think they're not all necessarily willing to tap into that, and some of them are really more interested in really opening the limits between the platforms. And I'm thinking of a company like Valve, which really has it in their DNA to break the barriers between platforms, and they are developing a lot of tools that will facilitate the job for game developers to actually be able to bring matchmaking implementations and other important components of cross-platform to different platforms, actually without the developer having to implement it themselves. But it really depends on a case-by-case basis. Some first parties are really keen and open to that and want to break down barriers with the developers. Some others are a little bit less into that idea.
I'd say also that developer will be like platform developer will be like everybody easier to it will be easier to get help from them if like you use some of the unique specificities of their platform, like if you do the latest PlayStation gamepad, if you use the latest Apple iOS system, etc. So it's also a bit of a dialogue, like they can help you. If you help them, it's always a discussion. So it takes time, but in the end, it can be interesting for both parties.
And you, Gabriel?
Yeah, nothing much further to add. I usually get some form of support from the first parties if we have technical problems.
That's great. Well, you know what, guys? This is pretty much all the time that we have for this panel and this presentation. I just first of all, just wanted to thank the people that are watching today. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for being part of this presentation. Obviously, I want to thank Manea, Castet from Gameloft, Gabriel Huot from Illogica, and Stefan Beauchamp-Daniel from Behavior Interactive. Thanks, you guys, for being part of this great panel. We had a lot of fun. And I want to thank for myself, Gameloft, for inviting me to host this panel. It was a pleasure to be with you guys, and I hope we will cross paths really soon, and hopefully in person. So thanks to everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.